Well, we have one of the biggest YouTubers on our podcast. I think we're 4 or 5 episodes in, and you are here.
You might be a little biased. And the reason you might be a little biased is because we're actually brothers.
Yes, we are actually brothers. I know we have a lot of spiritual brothers that we love and care about, but we are
Tim,
actually
who's back there. We got our brother-in-law,
Marcel. He's Steven. Steven's actually going to be on the next one.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk to him about it.
I want to be here for that.
Yeah, it's going to be good.
I'll be your studio audience. Is it appropriate to applaud?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think it's sure, why not? Laugh, applaud, and whatever. I hope it's funny. I think it's gonna be a good time with Steven. But I wanted to talk to you about some of our memories.
Okay.
Some of our childhood memories. Because I think when you get on a podcast, people are asking you about the Holy Spirit. They're asking you about your books. They're asking you some deep theological questions. And I wonder if there's an audience that just wants to know our past.
I don't know if I'm that interesting.
I think you are. I was talking to Ruben on our last podcast about the spiritual realm, and I was talking about our childhood when we were young. And
I watched that.
Yes, and we seen a bunch of crazy things, and I think most people have heard the story, but I was actually there during the stories. I remember when you
hold on for context. There was your previous episode where you were talking about your different spiritual encounters that you had, and we had what was called the Hawthorne House.
Yes.
And there's no deep spiritual meaning. It was a house in Hawthorne. And during that time, we had various different encounters, and they weren't all positive. So that's the context here.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure that whoever's watching this.
Do you remember when we talk about the old ladies?
Yes, and I'll discuss it here, but I typically don't like to go into that because I think so much today, like especially coming out over the internet, and you hear a lot of teaching and messages that magnify demonic power while minimizing the power of the Holy Spirit. And I thought you did a really good job of covering that in the sense that you addressed that hype or that paranoia that surrounds the topic so often. So I'll share this just for the sake of sharing it because, as you said, maybe there's a couple of people who might be interested in some more of the details in terms of our testimony. But you talked about the old ladies. Now, you would hear them.
Right.
I saw them.
Yes, and I think that's crazy.
So there was one night, it only happened once, that I actually saw them. I heard it was like whispers. It was just this very faint whisper. And I would often hear it when riding my bike around the house. I would hear it in the room at night. I keep hitting things. Is that gonna ruin the podcast? I felt like, can I check my watch? I'm checking it not because I don't want to be here. I hit it and I was wondering if I cracked it. Okay, that's settled in my mind. Okay. I'll continue. Okay. So I remember I hear these voices, and it's about I don't even know what time it would have been, but I woke up and was in the middle of sleeping. And I turned around to see a couch in the middle of our room. And on the couch were 3 old ladies leaning over, whispering and talking to each other and looking right at me. One of them had like this long cigarette.
Oh, gosh.
I don't know what on earth that was about, but I do know, and I don't know if I'm giving too many details, but I'll just say this. A certain member in our family who was going through a deliverance session, having things cast out. During that time, they said that they had a vision of 3 old ladies melting. And I'll tell you who it was maybe later, but I didn't know about that. So you got to imagine I have this experience, we'll call it, as a kid. And then years later, I hear that story and I connected the dots. I mean, it was a little bit jarring when I heard that. And so, of course, ultimately, the testimony ends with God getting the glory. It's just we experienced God's miracle working power. Right. We get saved. There was this breakthrough, and all of that stopped. But those are the details that I don't see as completely necessary. But I think in a format like this,
they're interesting. I think they're very interesting, and I think to be growing up in that, seeing one part of it and then hearing the other part. That's why I love having these conversations, especially with like Buddy and our cousins, our family, where we were able to talk about the things, we can kind of connect all that. But I don't remember when we were kids, I don't remember tough times as like being financially tough, or I don't remember a lot of arguments in the house. I remember more spiritual tough times.
Well, mom and dad were always very good at the way they honored each other in the home. So this is something that we always talk about. Our parents, who pastored a church when we were younger, they were the same people in the pulpit and at home. Right. It wasn't like there was a mask that came off and suddenly they became these mean people or these compromising people. Dad was dad in the house, in the pulpit, wherever, whatever, in front of people. He was the same guy. Same thing with mom. And they had this agreement in their marriage where they would never disagree in front of the kids. And so I'm sure they had their disagreements, but they had and do have a rock solid marriage. So there was no tension there. And then you had mentioned about financial struggle. Well, there was financial struggle, but they didn't communicate that. Right. We wouldn't have known. Only now in hindsight, do I look at the neighborhood we lived in? Do I look at old pictures? Do I remember certain moments where it kind of dawns on me like, oh, we weren't in a terrible position, but it wasn't the best of circumstances. Right. But they made it such.
But I do remember the darkness. I remember just feeling like, just growing up and being scared a lot.
Do you remember that we would have friends and cousins who would come over and not want to come over again because they felt the same thing?
Yes.
And so I have stories that I learned years later from friends who would be over, that things they saw in the house, and but again, I don't like to linger on these things because to me, I think the purpose of sharing something like this would be to demonstrate a contrast.
Right.
This is how dark it was, and this is what God brought us out of.
Well, I don't mean to interrupt, but I think for us, there was still the element of consistency of serving God.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
And I think that's what got us, I guess, through it. It was almost like that was the enemy's play. The enemy was trying to stop what God was doing, specifically in our family, and it didn't work.
Right.
You know what I mean? And we're all serving God today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
know?
I mean, we mom and dad, they're assistant pastors at the church you pastor. We got our brother-in-law right there behind the camera, Marcel, married to our sister. And, the families are living in God's grace. And I think, again, I think it's a powerful testimony, especially considering what could have been the alternative.
Right. And what I find interesting is our kids, I don't think they're not going to experience those things.
No.
And I think that's amazing, that they don't have to go through those things that we went through. But I wonder if I wonder how God's going to reveal himself to our children. Because I feel like for us, there was that revelation of the spiritual realm through that kind of darkness.
Like what the enemy meant for evil, God turned around for
good. But I
good.
wonder what's going to happen for our kids.
I think in situations like ours, I mean, you see various different types of testimonies. Certain testimonies where there's this very stark contrast between what was and what is now. And there are other testimonies of what never was because of God's grace. Some, you and I never got into the party scene, the drug scene, or anything like that. So we would often hear these pastors come to our church, ex high-ranking member of this Church of Satan, and ex-convict and ex this, and I was like, we would look at that and like, what testimony? And somebody told me, a friend of ours, Prophet Rob Sanchez, years ago told me, he goes, your testimony is what God kept you from. So I think that is the blessing of generational foundations of spiritual influence, where we can see now that we can build upon what God has given to us. So demonstrating that same purity, demonstrating that same consistency of character, of course, the foundation of the word. And it's almost like what God meant it to be all along, a functioning,
healthy,
thriving family, a spiritually healthy, thriving family. And I think that might be how God does it. Of course, we don't know. There could be a supernatural experience of a more heavenly tone, if you will. But it's a good question, I think. But I think that as long as the foundation of the word is being laid and godly character is being displayed, it really helps to remove any barriers, at least in their heart, that would prevent them from experiencing something like that.
I think what I love too is our family. Within our family, there is a lot of really good examples, right? There's a lot of places that our kids can go to, because there's going to be those seasons where our kids don't want to talk to us. You know, my boys are probably not going to want to talk to me. They're going to want to talk to you or Marcel or to dad. And I love that we have those relationships, and there's not this division. You know, a lot of people used to tell me as your ministry was growing, they used to like pray for me and say, hey, you know, I just feel like God's telling you, you're not in your brother's shadow. You know, like it was like, that was a prophetic word from like everybody that came through.
Well, because they were prophesying from their imagination.
Well, exactly.
Or they would look at the situation and try to put two and two together and say, well, surely it must be that he feels this way. And so they would give
and I didn't.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think that's something, I mean, I definitely give that to dad, right? His example of the way he raised us. There's not this strife between you and I. There's not this strife between our family. And our kids are going to be able to have these relationships that aren't full of jealousy. They're not competitive. There's like unity within the family, which I think is really healthy.
But even as we talk about this, I think it might be worth exploring the idea of what would be if that weren't the case, because there are going to be people who hear this, who listen and maybe go, well, I don't have that.
Right.
Or I'm not experiencing that. Or almost like, well, good for you, but what about me? And I'm not saying that there's any, I'm not assuming any level of cynicism in any listener's heart, but you know, it does beg the question, well, what about what God can do for my family? What about my family?
Right.
And so, you know, I think that is going back to why we would share those aspects of the more dark times, which again, demonstrate God's ability to bring someone out of that. You go back generations in our family and you're going to find, you know,
right.
It gets real dark real fast. But and I don't mean to, I'll go into it so there's no room for speculation, because that's how, you know, the internet works. They're like, oh, okay, are they in the Illuminati, or, you know?
Oh my gosh.
There was somebody wrote something about me being in the Illuminati.
I've seen the YouTube videos.
Yeah, and this is back when I lived with mom and dad. I'm like, if I was in the Illuminati, I wouldn't be living with my parents. But anyway, no, you know, there was a lot of witchcraft in our family's history. God delivered us out of that. There was a lot of there were some members of our family, you know, I think it was maybe 3 or 4 generations ago, who were very involved in the political spheres, and it wasn't godly. It wasn't a godly environment. Right. But you know, you may not be in the position where you have this amazing godly heritage where you can look back and say, well, you know, my grandmother was saved, my great grandmother was saved, you know, or great grandfather, and so forth. But if that's not the case, then God can start it with you.
Right.
And that's there's a lot to celebrate in that.
Well, I think that is the testimony of our family. It's literally a miracle. Like, it shouldn't be what it is. You know, it's God's hand, it's God's mercy over us, and it's great to live in it. You know, and now we're raising families together. And I do want to ask you, because you're a great preacher, great writer, great teacher, great.
Thank you.
Yes, I have to say that. I believe it.
Yeah,
but I have to.
You have to say it. Yeah, you're a little biased.
But you're also a great uncle and a great father. And I think a lot of people highlight the ministry portion of your life because obviously they don't see the personal part of your life, which we all get to live in, like be a part of that. You know, everybody wants to go to Uncle Diga's house. Everybody loves to hang out with you. Even Liam, he's like, if we go to your house, he's like, is Uncle Diga gonna be there? And he'll pack his bag. He's got his Pokemon cards and he's ready to play a game or just just ready to have some fun. And so I want to ask you, what is your favorite part or role about being an uncle in comparison to being a father?
All of the fun, none of the responsibility.
Yeah, I guess
I get to give them the snacks, I get to play the games, and then if they start acting up, I just send them back home.
This is true. Yeah. This is true. I think you definitely spoil them, almost more than mom and dad spoil them.
That's my job.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm always checking things with you guys too. Even on that, as an uncle, I want to make sure I'm not overstepping any bounds. Like, okay, like if you guys said no, you can't have you know, this toy or play that game, and you know they've tried it a few times.
I'm sure.
And I can always tell because it's a very like sheepish, like, Uncle Diga, do you think that you can get us this, or even you know, Danny J, Marcel's boy, you know, there's a certain tone they have where I'm like, what did your parents say? And they're like, well, even Steve's kid, Ben's the same way. He uses me a lot for snacks that he's not supposed to have.
Like Lucas.
So, yeah, like Lukey Dukes, man. That's what I call him, Lukey Dukes. Lucas He comes over, and I always do his little voice. You know, he comes, Uncle Diga, can I?
You make him sound like a robot.
I don't know what it is about him. It makes me laugh.
But you've been able to build a ministry. You've been able to build a family. You've been able to be an uncle. And it's almost like I sometimes we'll be talking about certain things, and you have like this knowledge about the most random stuff. And I'm thinking, when did you have time to even like read about this or think about this or study it? And I really wanted to ask you, how do you find or balance the priorities in your life in order to be successful in what you find important, right? Whether it's family, whether it's ministry. What are the things that you found to work when it comes to balancing those priorities?
I don't know if there's ever going to be a balance as much as there is a regular maintenance of the things that are important, because when we use terms like balance in the family, okay, let's use Jess and I for an example. Jess is amazing in that she's just supports everything, and she never once in the now almost 10 years, April it'll be 10 years, well, at the time of this recording, never once have I ever heard a complaint about me having to travel or go somewhere. And I mean, not even a hint, not even a subtle jab of, well, have fun on your trip. You know, nothing like that ever, not even a hint of it. But I want to make sure I'm not taking advantage of that, that I'm also making sure, and I do like a weekly checkup with her. How are you doing? What can I do better? What more do you need from me? So the way I picture it, and again, I was talking about balance. I wouldn't say balance, because when you think of balance, you think 2 hours for you, 2 hours for this, 2 hours for that. It's like this perfect equilibrium of time spread over different things. It's never going to be like that. It's always just a matter of making sure everything is properly maintained. The garden is tended to, the glass is full, however you want to word it. So I picture it like this. There's a couple visuals that I use to help keep my perspective proper. Number one, picture in front of us several glasses, and I mean like that you drink out of. And they're arranged in a pyramid. And even saying that, some people will take that and say, see, pyramid, Illuminati. But let's just say there's a pyramid of glasses, okay?
Yeah.
And at the very top, that glass is the one you want to fill. Because if you can fill that top glass, then that begins to trickle over into all the other glasses. So the question is, what is that top glass? Well, that top glass is prayer and the word. You fill that top glass, and then under that, you have family. And then you have your friends. Well, you look like you want to say something. What do you?
I'm waiting. It's good.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay.
Let me stop you there, because I think if I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, okay, for somebody who's watching, how do you know if that top glass is filled? Right? Is there like a practical, I guess, let me ask you that first. How do you know if that top glass is being filled? Because some people I can see going like, well, do I have to read for an hour a day? Do I have to pray for an hour a day? Is that when it's being filled?
I think sometimes people think that prayer and the word and devotion to these spiritual practices has this accumulative effect that ultimately culminates to this perfect, flow of life. But it's like this. I think you keep that full when you trust and obey. So people ask me things like, they watch the services where people are touched by God's power or healed or delivered. And they're like, what's the secret? And I'm like, there is no secret. Like there's nothing I can say that you're not going to be able to read in the plain teachings of Scripture. It is just a matter of, I know it's not me.
Right.
I know that it's Him. It's simple faith where I absolutely am trusting. So I'm not trusting my ability to stay devoted to Him. I'm trusting His ability to keep me devoted. I'm not trusting even in my prayer life. My faith is not in my prayer life. My faith is not in my reading of the word. My faith is not even in my faith. My faith is in Him. And I know He's got me. I'm good. There's this confidence and this flow that comes with it. So I don't even keep track of prayer. I don't keep track of how many hours. People ask all the time, how many hours? I don't track that, because the moment I start tracking it, then when God starts to move, I'm going to think it's because I checked off the boxes and had this wonderful prayer life. Well, what about those Matthew 7, 21 through 23? they're strutting up to the Lord and they're saying, Lord, Lord, do we not prophesy in your name?
Right.
Do we not cast out devils in your name? Do we not do many mighty works in your name? Well, think about the fact that that was their defense, and therefore it proves that they were trusting in their own ability. They didn't say, did we not trust in you? Did we not put our faith in the cross? They said, didn't we do all these great things? And so I think that at least, and you know me, I'm I'm constantly moving. There's never a moment where I'm not, and I may seem, even to people who know me, it seems like I'm never settled. But ultimately, within, there's just this deep confidence of it's all him. It's literally all him. Well, isn't it your surrender? Yeah, but who gives me the desire to surrender? Who helps me to do that when he gives me that desire? So he gives me the desire to pray. He gives me the reminder to pray. He helps me when I pray. He helps me stay consistent in prayer. I mean, he does it, the whole work. And so
would you say that he's leading, you just have to obey? But or is obedience even
Psalm 119, incline my heart to your statutes. In other words, you do it. Romans 8:26, the Holy Spirit prays for us. And verse 27, it says he prays for us in harmony with God's own will. In other words, he's bending even our desires to God.
I need tissue. Can I get tissue? I'm crying. I'm just kidding. This is good.
Who's that out there? Well.
We're recording. Hi, Mom.
Hi, Mom.
My mom just walked into the podcast
right in the middle of the interview.
Come on in.
Hi, Mom.
We can keep going.
Okay.
I think we can keep going.
No, that's great.
But
I mean, how appropriate is that when you're interviewing your brother on your podcast?
Your mom
our
shows
mom,
up.
we're like, Mom.
Oh, come on, get out of my room, Mom. I listened to this, and there's a lot I want to talk to you about.
But hold on, let's talk about the glasses.
Yes.
So the top glass, and then family,
Yes.
then ministry. And so as long as you take care of those, that's ultimately, so if ever there's an imbalance, or if ever I feel any of those things are suffering or not being fulfilled, I'm willing to let the other glasses go without until I can fix what's going on with the top tier.
Is this something you learned in recent ministry, or do you feel like when you were younger, you were already developing this?
I think I always knew it in theory, and maybe in the last 5 or 6 years, I think marriage. Since I got married, it went from being theory to being practice. And now I have to do this because there's someone else who and we share a life. It's not my life and her life together. It is a shared life. It's one life. So I got to be aware of that. So definitely, since I got married, it has. I like to say that marriage is an assault on selfishness.
I agree with that. Was there a moment in marriage in the beginning year, in the early years, where you're like, oh shoot, I have to get this under control? Because, I know that you said Jess never really complained about ministry, but did you ever feel like you weren't providing something or doing what was right for her?
No, because she supports me in such a way where it really inspires me to be a good husband. So from the very get-go, I'm like, she's really good to me. And it makes you want to reciprocate that.
What do you think that you wish you would have had established younger that you do now?
Is this just about marriage or in general?
Ministry,
okay, so what do I wish I had established? What do you mean by that?
Like habits, priorities.
Yeah, wow.
Or do you feel like it all kind of just got you to where you are and you're good with it?
I mean, I don't want to try to sound like I have it all together in one area, but because there's a lot of progress I could have made. I would have read the word more. I would have prayed more. I would have, those spiritual dynamics, of course. But I think that if I was lopsided in any regard, it would have been in the more practical things like physical health and I think financial acumen. I would have probably learned earlier on, what to do with what you save as opposed to saving it and letting inflation just eat away at it. And I think had I known those things, maybe financially I would have been in a better position. Maybe my health would have been a little better. Now I take it very seriously, but not that, I'm, dying or anything.
Yeah.
I mean, technically we're all dying, but you know what I mean?
That's a clip. So what would you tell your younger self? if you can go back in time right now, back to the Norwalk house,
pray more, read the word more.
Where do you think the state of ministry today is for young people? So you have social media, you have YouTube. It's easy to get a platform, and there's a lot of young people doing it. And so, where do you think the state of ministry is at for young people today?
You know, on one end of the spectrum, I do see that some people are bypassing the process right to the platform. And I get that. Having said that, I think it's good to know that there are so many who are just out there preaching the gospel. I think there's a difference between somebody using social media to spread the gospel, to encourage, and someone using social media to leverage that audience to the place where they're now putting themselves in a leadership position that they're not qualified for. And the scripture gives us qualifications for what a good leader is. Now, that is the standard. You know, you and I, we were sent out by a sending church and an assembly of believers and a group of elders, and you know that watched our lives, kept us accountable. So I think, just for the sake of their own spiritual safety, I think that's important to have. But, you know, people, you know, like Gen Z getting on TikTok and praying, let me pray for you. I'm a Christian, ask me questions. I love that. I think we need more of that. And, you know, that's very different than becoming a pastor or a teacher or an evangelist. I think when those two converge without that process being in place, that's when you have some issues.
I feel like people are too hard on the younger people using social media.
Very much so.
It's jealousy. I was going to say that. I feel like it's almost jealousy. Like, you got bigger faster than I did. You have no authority to be doing what, you know?
Yeah. I mean, like, I've been on YouTube since 2007, building and working. And then you get these Gen Zers getting on there. They jump on a YouTube and in, you know, 3 months they have 5 million subscribers. And I'm going, you know, oh, whoa, they pass us up, but I celebrate that.
Yeah.
You know, as interesting as that is, I mean, I don't understand it. I don't know why that is. I don't get the algorithm like they do, but why would I be bothered by that when we're all building the kingdom, when we're all winning souls? That I celebrate that. Now, I am concerned if that then turns into this kind of leadership thing that they're not ready to step into.
Right.
Not because I'm just mad that they bypassed the process, but because that's their soul now. That's their emotional well-being. That's their mental well-being. That's their family. That's their spiritual accountability, right? I would say I would have some concerns for them. And then also, you know, somebody gets enough influence and then they start teaching things that are just really way out of line. That's also dangerous for the body of Christ. So those would be the main two concerns. But in general, more people just sharing their testimony, more people just praying for people, more people just pointing to Jesus. I see no issue with that in a general sense, with some specific caveats.
I think what I'm learning in this season of life, pastoring and all that, I think what I'm learning is learning how to celebrate the success of other people. There was, we pastor here in Texas, and I saw this church in the general area, right, with us. He posted online, he's like, somebody just gave us 5 acres of land in a church building for free and clear. And I'm just like, you know, but what I found interesting for the first time, and it's I guess it's God working in me, is for the first time, I literally didn't feel even like an ounce of like, I wish that was us. Like, that should have been, or I guess I should say, I didn't say it should have been us.
Right.
I was happy for them. And then I thought, like, why are we so quick to pull people down that are successful in the kingdom of God? And I think that's something that I love what you do.
And I think that comes from, and I know we always say, or it's kind of cliche to say, well, that comes from insecurity.
Right.
But I want to identify what that insecurity is. That insecurity is the fear that if they have, I won't.
Right.
If they get it, I can't. If they gain, I lose. And so that comes from this, what's called scarcity mentality, where, well, they got that property,
so there's no more.
So there's no more property now for me.
Yeah.
Or they have, 5,000 members, so there's no one else in the city. But there's enough souls that need to be won where we can have a church on every corner, packed and filled to the brim, double services, and it would still work. The other thing I like to do is don't get jealous, get inspired.
Mm-hmm.
To where you see God do it, it's like, okay, well, so those things do happen. If it happened for them, God can do it for me.
Right.
And if it doesn't, how he uses me is none of my business anyway. You just live with an open hand where God can put things in and God can take things out.
Well, I think that's been the question is like, well, for me and where we're at today is like, how do you know what is the dream that's yours and what is the dream that's God's?
I think they're one and the same when you're walking with him. This is what I mean by overcomplicating things. And you know, even in like, well, how do you know balance and all? I just trust him.
Yeah.
I just trust him. Now, I'm not saying that every desire we have is God. I'm saying that God designed you to be a certain way for a certain purpose. Why do I love media? Why is it something that I'm fascinated with? Why is it something that I love working with? Because it's a part of the calling. Your purpose is linked with your passion. God puts deposits in you that ultimately pull you towards your divine purpose.
I think what I've loved that you've done, that I've been able to see, even back in the early days, is you've always been really good at lifting other ministries up, serving other people, blessing other people, even when it didn't really make sense. I mean, there's tons of stories that you have where you gave up what you needed to somebody else who needed it, and God blessed you. But where do you think that unity is today? Do you feel like ministries are more united today, or do you feel like there's more division and jealousy?
I wouldn't know how to quantify that, because it would be anecdotal, not statistical. Is that a word, statistical?
Sure. If you said it, I believe it is.
Okay, well, hey, if I say it with enough confidence, it will become a word. I guess all words are made up when you really get down to it. But anyway, I got sidetracked there. Oh, division, unity,
ministry.
The more important subject there. I think that it's hard to quantify. I'm sure social media might highlight some of the differences, but I think humanity's humanity, and there'll always be people who are doing it even in Paul's day. Some people do it because of selfish ambition. Right. Some people do it to try to spite him. But as long as the gospel is being preached, I think God uses it all. So in terms of division, unity, who's with who and who's, I wouldn't know how to quantify that.
I guess it doesn't matter, right?
Right. You just stay focused on what God called you to do. You make sure you're practicing biblical unity. You make sure you're blessing others. You make sure you're supporting the body, cheering on fellow laborers in Christ, and you run your race. And stopping to assess those things, I mean, it could begin to affect you, who you are. It affects your spirit, and it actually starts coming out in your preaching.
Okay, here's another question.
All right.
In all that you've done, have you ever felt that competitive spirit against another ministry?
Absolutely.
How do you figure out what's good about it and what to get rid of when it comes to that?
I think God has designed men and women a certain way, and there's a drive in us to build and to create and to thrive. I think there's value in setting landmarks and goals, but landmarks and goals are nothing outside of objective measures. Objective measures are something that everyone is going for, and therefore that creates, in the nature of growth itself, this competition. But I think that you've crossed a line when that competitive spirit, and when I say spirit, I don't mean an actual demonic spirit, I mean competitive disposition, that competitive attitude becomes so dominant that you now become discouraged when they thrive and encouraged when they fail. That's when you've crossed the line. I think man to man, there's always that wanting to, you want to hit the records, you want to beat the statistics. Why? Because it's goals, it's measurements, and it helps you, see where you are in comparison to the landscape that you're in. So when I say competition, I don't mean like I'm going to do better than you, I'm going to tear you down. Again, I'm just talking about in a general sense. Right. You want to do well, but that drive to do well has crossed a line when you celebrate the downfall of others. That has crossed the line when you are discouraged by others winning. And so what I like to do is whenever I get into this place where the enemy tries to tempt me to go into that competitive thought process, to live under that competitive paradigm, is number one, I start to pray for the ministries that the enemy tries to plant those seeds in my heart for. Number two, I give to those ministries. And then number three, I just try to recenter myself in the Lord. And I don't mean that in like the New Age sense. I mean, just recalibrate the mind and say, okay, why am I doing this? What are the motives? And why would I be upset when someone else has a win for the kingdom of which we are all a part? And so I think it is immaturity. I think it is an issue that needs to be dealt with. And if you don't deal with it, it begins to affect everything about you. Sometimes preachers preach. They are preaching to what is called a straw man. You ever go to like a church that's half empty and the pastor's yelling at people at how they're not committed to church? He's yelling at the empty seats, but the people who are there were committed enough to show up.
Right.
Or he's preaching against division and people who leave the church. Or the people who left the church aren't there. The people who are there are the ones that stayed.
Right.
So you're preaching against the straw man. You're preaching against a voice that isn't there. You're preaching against someone who's not even likely going to hear what you're saying. So if you're not careful in terms of that competitive spirit, or in terms of, watching others succeed, it starts to get into your spirit, and you start to now preach it to others, because you were talking about unity and division. So if you're just hyper aware of all this division in the church, then that gets into your spirit. You have one person or two people in mind, and you're preaching against them now to congregations taking notes and looking around like, what did we do?
Right.
So it's called preaching to the straw man. Anyway, back to talking about what we're talking about now is the competitive spirit. Yes, absolutely. I think that's in every man and in every woman to some degree. I mean, we are designed differently, but I think in every man there is this competitive drive, and we just got to make sure that that's not reaching an ungodly level.
Right. You said drive, and I'm wondering, how far do you drive in golf?
I saw your face.
That's all I thought about.
I saw his face.
That's literally all I thought about when you said
his eyebrow twitched, and he tried not to smile. This is what he did.
The only reason I didn't want to smile is because I didn't want you to go, what? Why are you smiling?
Well, I already saw it. I saw the subtle movements in your face, so that he's got a question or something. I was gonna say, you have a question, don't you?
That's all I thought.
I honestly don't know. This is gonna sound funny. You have to ask Steve.
Yeah.
Because he keeps track. Because even when I drive, I can't even see where the ball goes. It goes so far. I'm just kidding.
Yeah, right. It goes so far to the right or to the left that you lose it. But I think what's been cool about working with the ministry, and because we have these conversations about competition and unity, and we've been able to be a part of something very successful when it comes to the kingdom work, touching lives.
I like to use the word fruitful.
Okay, fruitful. Sure. We've been a part of something very fruitful and successful in not just the YouTube, but the events and the lives that have been changed and all that. And I think you have been able to find something that a lot of people want to glean from. There's always people coming into the studio. I'm sure there's a lot of people calling you, asking what you're doing. Where do you think you really found that ministry success or ministry fruitfulness? Was it in teamwork? Was it in relying on the gifts of others? How did you build what we have today?
I didn't build it. I didn't build it. I just trust and obey. And you do the next thing. That's what I just do. The next thing. What is the Lord saying now? What is the Lord saying now? Now, there are strategies. There are systems, because everything God does is orderly. Everything God does has a system. Like you hear sometimes these people say, I don't want to be a part of organized church. Like, you want to be a part of chaotic church? Mm-hmm. Everything God does has a system.
Yeah.
My body is made up of systems. The earth is an ecosystem that is placed in a solar system. The church is a system. So we can implement all of that, and I think that's important. I think it's 1 Corinthians chapter 14, verse 40, that all things be done decently and in order. We have to live in an orderly fashion. We have to do things with structure and with intention and care and good stewardship. When it comes down to it, I can't point to the thing that I can say that's when it started, or that's where really there was a turning point, or that right there. It's just the Holy Spirit breathed on it. I'm not saying he doesn't breathe on the ministries that don't see that kind of, those metrics. But I'm saying I could have done this on my own and it would have failed. But because I just trusted him, and I knew, and I still to this day know, even when I get the calls and how do you build a channel and what are you guys doing? And we give them a peek behind the curtain, like come, we invite ministries, come look at our systems, come. I let them meet with our staff. I let them come to the studio, take notes, take pictures, whatever you want to do, because we're about the kingdom. But I always stress, you can go and do all of this, and I'm not trying to give the spiritual sounding answer. I cannot pinpoint it other than to say God did it.
Right. How important do you think it was that the people he brought around to help you?
I mean, that was very important. And obviously everything God calls us to do is to be done in the context of community. But, I can say definitely that God used them, like God used you to help with early on. You were helping with the...
I have to tell this story.
Okay, I'm laughing.
I have to tell this story. So when I first got hired with the ministry, I was partner relations. So some of you might remember me. But also, this is a foolish decision on your part, but I was in charge of marketing.
Oh, no, that's not even the story I'm thinking about.
Oh, I know you're thinking about. Well, let me tell the marketing story. So it was one of the bigger events at the time, which was a church of like 300 seats.
Yeah, that was huge for us.
I was tasked to market it and invite people and call pastors, and I think like 30 people showed up to that event.
I think you had sent out a text or two and an email. You're like, I told them, like, no follow up, no anything else. But hey, we worked through it. There was also another as a partner developer or as a partner department correspondent, whatever on earth you were. You helped, and you were kind of like an everyman. Like you did everything. You did a little bit of everything. Graphics, there was a lot to be done, and you handled it. But basically, every month we wanted to create a partner gift. So something we could send to our partners just to say thank you. Yeah. Now today it's digital. We got the monthly Zoom call and so forth. I said, Michael, I want to do like a nice calendar with the Bible reading plan so that they can go through it. And then the Bible reading plan will have pictures of the ministry, information, and facts.
Oh, God, this is terrible.
And so, like, he prints up this impractical...
it's like a foam
this
board.
Useless piece of foam. Maybe... I mean, what, like
it was probably like
a foot and a half
as big
by.
As this.
No, it was bigger than that. It was maybe
two of these.
Maybe a foot and a half by a foot and a half. It's just this big piece of foam with printed on it. It's like January, but the Bible reading plan isn't even like helpful. It's like
I found that online by the way. But yes, I did.
It was terrible. It was January. Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Number, Deuteronomy. And then like all the way down, March, April, it was just the month and then listing the books of the Bible in order. No like a little bit of Old Testament, a little bit of New Testament, nothing like that. And then on the other side, it was just pictures of all the ministry staff with their titles, half of their titles misspelled. And we send it out, and I get it, and I'm like, it's just this foam, like it was useless.
It was bad.
And so anyway,
we printed a whole bunch of them too.
We had a bunch printed. I get to the office, I'm like, what is this? That's the calendar. That's the Bible reading plan.
Listen,
anyways, so I don't know what we did with those. I think we sent them out, and people were probably very confused.
You clearly hired the right people at the right time.
Okay, but all that to say, you were, other than those couple instances, you were very helpful. We brought on Isaiah Lopez, who did the finances. And there were months where we said we have to delay payroll by a couple weeks. And everyone was just, okay, it's the work of the ministry. We don't do this for money. We do this for the Lord. So we just kept at it. And then we added Tim. Well, Tim came on after someone else. We had a few directors who came through. They were all very helpful. And Tim came on later. And I know what you're thinking, and we're not going there.
No, we don't need to.
Tim was very helpful. Tim came on, and when Tim came on, is like it took the media to the next level. When Steve Moctezuma came on, the worship to the next level. Ruben came on for events, so I could see how God used them. But again, God brought us together. God put it on my heart to invite them to be part of the team. God gave them the skills they have. God worked through them. So yeah, I can point in the natural to things that were effective, at least by human metrics, but in terms of the fruitfulness, the growth, that favor that people see on it, it is all him. I can't take, I'm not just trying to sound humble and trying to give what I think is the right answer. It's all him. It's all him.
Well, I think that's actually really encouraging, because I feel like most people watching or even seeing your ministry or ministries like yours that are doing really well, I think the temptation is to like immediately go into, well, I could never do something like that. I could never accomplish that. And I think there is a lot of peace in the abandonment of self. I can't do it, right? So it's almost like, okay, God, here's my life. Do whatever you want with it. If you want to take me and build a ministry like this, I'll do it. Church, whatever it is. I think there's peace in that, right? There's a lot of peace in that mindset of just saying, God, I'm just a broken vessel. Just use me how you want to, right? And would you say that's kind of just what you've been doing?
Absolutely. It's just trust and obey. Trust and obey. We can get into strategies. Sometimes what happens is God will bless a ministry. They get all this fruitfulness, and then they want to package that success as if it's like something they attained on their own. Here's my course. And there's nothing wrong with like consultation and, strategy. I don't have any issue with that as long as it's understood that you can put forth your best effort, but ultimately it's going to be the Lord who does it.
And you have to be okay with
what he does. And so we put forth our best effort because the gospel deserves our best effort. Because we honor ministry, because it's something he entrusted us with, but ultimately it's going to be him.
Do you feel like mentorship was important for you back then?
God used mentorship too. God uses mentorship today.
Who are your mentors today?
There's people like Dad. There's our pastor, Pastor Omar. I have people like Pastor Phil, Pastor Benny. I could list several other people who are influential. Ron Simpkins, names people probably wouldn't know. Ron Simpkins is one of them. From time to time, still talk to him. I got a lot of good friends who are in the ministry, who we glean off of each other, and if one of us needs a little bit of a, hey man, what's going on here? What's going on there? Then you get more into that mutual. The mutual aspect of it. I'm thinking Eddie Vargas. He speaks into my life.
You still listen to a lot of good voices.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not a lone. I don't want to use. Well, I'm already going there. I don't like cliches, but I'm not a lone wolf. Yeah. Even though wolves are in packs. I don't know why that became a saying.
Well, it's probably because the lone wolf is in danger because he should be in the pack.
There you go.
That was good, huh?
I like it.
Figured that out.
I'm sure that's right.
It's got to be. It's on a podcast. It's got to be right. Who are your top 3 YouTubers right now?
YouTubers.
Yes, like you would say, hey, go watch their channel.
Go watch them. The Objective Believer does an astounding job of presenting the charismatic worldview from a philosophical framework. Excellent work. Brilliant mind. Check out, it's called The Objective Believer. I would say he's like, if anybody knows him, it's like a William Lane Craig meets, I don't know, name a charismatic preacher. Some charismatic preacher. Anyway, I don't know. I'm sorry, my friend, if that's not much of an endorsement, but the Objective Believer does a great job. Check out his content. I love Spencer Nakamura. You know Spencer.
I love Spencer.
Spencer is great. I was actually just on the phone with him. I was sitting out in the car just before I came in. I was on the phone with Spencer. Brilliant mind. I love the way he addresses topics, and just a genuine. He and his wife, they're friends of Jess and I, and so we love them. And then who's a good YouTuber? There's so many, but I would have to say probably this channel.
Which
brings me to my point here. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Get connected with my brother, my biological brother, literal brother here.
Yes, real. Now, as we end, I want to know a story that not everybody would know about you.
A story that not everyone would know about me. I fell down the stairs one time and nobody saw it. So
Really?
At
your house?
No, it was at some of you might know him, but is Pastor Kelly Lorkey. I was staying at his house, and I was just on my phone, and I just fell down the stairs, and I got up, and nobody saw it. And now here I am announcing it to the whole world.
One time I was driving in the rain, and I decided to. Remember the blue Honda Civic I used to have, a really two-tone.
You had several cars. You didn't take
It was
care
the
of
first
any
one.
of them.
I tried to drift in the rain, and I spun out, and I landed. I stopped probably like 6 feet in front of the light pole, and I looked around, and I just said, "Oh, I just got to keep going," and I drove off.
Yeah, what was wrong with you?
I would never do that today, but
Good.
I don't know. I mean, I was 19. You know, what was I thinking? But hey, one of the best YouTubers on YouTube today, and you were with us. I appreciate you. Thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you for answering the tough questions. Thank you for the great conversation we had. Hey, listen, if you guys enjoy this content, make sure you like the video, comment below, let me know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. I'll see you next time.